Well, hey, welcome back to Journals for Breakfast. My name is Andrea, and you are so welcome here. In my previous video, we talked about a reading journal, we talked about cookbooks, we talked about a brain dump journal, but I mentioned that I was going to film another video about what I'm actually reading. The reading journal was just kind of a why I make a reading journal. And this one's more about what I actually have read in 2025. I'm not going to cover everything. As I mentioned in the previous video, I'm on book 20, and I don't have time to cover 20 books, and you don't want to listen to me talk about 20 books. But I am going to tell you about the stuff I've loved the most. This is not in order of how I read them. They're just in order of how I've grabbed this stack off of this table. So first up are the Clockwork Angel series. These are by Cassandra Clare, and I'll show you something in this book so you can see the lineup. There are a lot of books in her lineup. So these are all part of this series. I read these three. So it starts up here. Then there's these three. And actually now there's two more to that too, I believe, that there are now two more in this final section. But these Shadow Hunter, let's see, no, Clockwork Angel, yeah, the Shadow Hunter novels. There's three of them that sit right in the middle of that whole series. And I had done a little research, and it was clear that they definitely would work as a standalone. Like if you hadn't read the Mortal Instruments, the previous 6 books or whatever, you could actually pick up with this and just go. So I did, and they're right, you could. So the first one was Clockwork Angel. You can see lots of tabs from great quotes within here. Gosh, okay, let's go through. Second is Clockwork Princess, even more tabs. And the third was Clockwork Prince. Less tabs in this one, really good story. Really good story. These other two just were loaded with quotes that were just really speaking to me at the time. Here's a better image of the Shadow Hunter series. So here's all the ones previous. Then you have, or whatever, Mortal Instruments. This is the threesome that I read, and then there's 3 more behind it now. I will absolutely read all of them. Let's talk about these and why I love them so much. So I go back to my reading journal, and I can take a look. First and foremost, this book, number 1 of this 3-part series, right? Of this middle series. This was the 5th book that I read this year, and enjoyable enough to make me want to read the rest. No question about that. The characters, I named the characters in here, and here's some quotes. You've always been what you are. That's not new. What you'll get used to is knowing it. Let's see another quote. One must be careful of books, said Tessa, and what's inside them, for words have the power to change us. There are so many quotes in here. These books are YA, and they're fantasy. I believe that they fall into the category of steampunk. Do you know that category? I think a lot of people do now. So it's taking place in like 1880 London, but there are mechanical devices and some technology that doesn't really line up with that time in the way that we would think about it specifically, except to say that there's magic involved. So magic is partly how this can happen. And because they're YA, what I want to say about them is they are clean, totally clean. Now, I love my spicy books, don't get me wrong, and we'll be talking about some of those. I love them. I'm a 54-year-old woman. I should be loving them. I could recommend this to a teenager. No question about it. A 14-year-old girl can read these books. I would feel comfortable recommending them to her. There is a romance happening, and the romance is a, what do they call that when there's 3 involved in the romance? So it's a, it's got some love in an emotional way, okay? The way that they communicate with one another, the thoughts they're having about each other, privately, etc. But it is very clean. And to be honest with you, I really liked it. It was kind of nice to be reading something that just wasn't so spicy. I've read every Sarah J. Maas that's been written, including the see, this is why I have this book journal, including the Crescent City series. I read that, the Crescent City novels. I read those this year also. They're spicy, y'all, like super duper. I would not recommend that to a teenager or 14-year-old, but these are really clean. But they also were this sort of Victoria, late Victoria, moving towards Gilded Age, London, which is just a time frame I just is romantic to me anyway. Love triangle. I knew it would come to me. There's a love triangle in this, but a really sweet one. It's really based on falling in love and emotion, and it's really precious. So Clockwork Angel is the first one of these three, and you could absolutely start right where I did, right in the Shadowhunters. Will I read the others? No question about it. I just don't know that that'll happen this year. That might be a 2026 goal. The next one up was the Clockwork Princess, and this one really is so in depth about the main female character. This one kind of introduces you to Will. This one goes into a lot of depth about Tessa and what's special about her and why she is being kind of hunted, what it is that is wanted from her. And it is such a great story. And then this one goes into Jim and his situation, and the love triangle sort of comes together, unfolds, and evolves in this book as well. And they are just beautifully written. I will say that they are a literarily referenced collection of books. If you are a reader, you are going to find so many literary references within this. Every chapter begins with a quote or a line, often from Lord Byron or Alfred Tennyson, so classic poets, and also Emily Dickinson and Bronte sisters, and it just comes up again and again. So there's a lot of literary reference in here. If you're a reader, you're going to respond to that, I think. The love triangle is engaging. The story is fun. And the other thing I'll say about it is that there's magic involved, and so it's definitely fantasy. And there's some battles, right? But they're pleasantly encapsulated. It's like there's this little thing that kicks up. And you go, oh no, are they going to be okay? Oh my gosh, we didn't see this coming. Oh, okay. Well, looks okay. Or they'll get them back. Don't worry about that. You know what I mean? And then you kind of move on into the characters in the story. And it had this way of feeling sort of like a mystery in the way that Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew used to feel to me. You know how you can just kind of get into their world, the way they were dressed, the feeling of the old house that they were creeping around in, or whatever. I got that vibe hardcore with these characters and what they were going through. So their battles weren't these like epic wars, you know, they're little fights that they get into that they can resolve relatively quickly, and you can just kind of carry on with the story. I loved that, because I will say one thing about Sarah Moss is, my gosh, like 300 pages devoted to a battle. That's a lot for me. That's not really the kind of reading I adore. I like characters and stories and not big wars happening as much. In fact, like Outlander, that was my favorite stuff ever. And even though I read every single book, the show itself, I kind of faded out when it moved into the American Revolution and kind of that whole season that was just about war. It's just not as interesting to me. So anyway, Shadowhunters, I hope you'll try those, because I think it's going to bring out this kind of reminder for you of what it was to read fantasy and kind of more adult kids books like Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, things like that. You're going to remember that part of your teen years when you read these books. And I thought they were so much fun. And they were so much fun that I did what I often do, which is when I finished the third one, I went right back and read every single page of the first one. I read number one completely all over again. I just wanted to be immersed right back in it. And by the time I got through the third one, like I really wanted to go back to book one and just sort of revisit who everybody was, how they met, because you're meeting them too in book one, you know what I mean? And so now when you come back after having read through the whole saga, you're going to see those characters as they're introduced, knowing the backstory now, right? Knowing their future. And so you see them in a really different way. And so the reread of this was really fun. And I do intend to reread the other two as well. And maybe once I finish those rereads, I'll jump into the next ones in there. So I absolutely loved them. Okay, let's get to what's next. I'll pause and we'll do another. Hold on. Okay, so the next up is the Bookbinder. And again, this is not in any particular order of how I read these. Bookbinder is a novel. This is not magic or fantasy. It's just a novel about World War I, and it takes place in Oxford in England during World War I, and I loved it. This is a book club book, so that's why this popped in here. And I loved it so much. It's by Pip Williams. She has 2 books, The Bookbinder and Dictionary of Lost Words. Dictionary of Lost Words, I don't know why I'm showing you the picture. I have the book right here. I believe Dictionary of Lost Words was published first, and this was a Reese's Book Club recommendation. And then Bookbinder is second. However, if you read the information at the end of the book provided by the author, she tells you that she just got so interested in the characters and the location when she wrote this that she decided to spin out and do a deeper dive and create this, and that it doesn't matter what order you read them in, that the characters are related, right? There's the town, the space, the place, they're related, but there isn't a sequential situation that it's going to make any difference which order you read it in. So once I read that, I decided that I would get this and put this on my TBR. So this is to be read. I haven't read it yet, but I loved this one. And all these flags are in here because this is a book that is, novels have a tendency for me, if they're beautifully written, if they're written, if prose is what's happening, I start flagging pages. This book was just so beautifully written. It just had such interesting quotes in it, and a lot of literary reference in this as well. Of course, she's a bookbinder. She is an avid reader. Her mother was an avid reader. They have tons of books in their home. And so there's going to be references back to, now this one particularly references back to classic Greek mythology. I'm trying to think what else. And so some stuff that I'm not super familiar with, but we're all familiar with the basic sort of concepts of. So it didn't feel so foreign, but it wasn't as familiar to me. Like had she been referring back to Jane Austen, it would have been second nature. But I felt like this was so delightful to read. And I loved that it was historical fiction. The information about World War I in this was fascinating to me. A lot of that stuff is accurate, and I didn't know much about that. I've read a lot of World War II historical fiction, but not so much World War I. And then her job as a bookbinder was fascinating to me. But as you know, I'm a paper person. I make collages and things like that. So like she has her own folding bone. I've shown you guys this before. This is my bone folder. I've had this since about 1993. And the main character in this has her own for her binding at the factory, and just the feel of it in her hand and her talking about it. It just really resonated with me. So absolutely loved it, and looking forward to Dictionary of Lost Words as my next, when I'm ready to do another novel, I'll jump into that. All right, I'm going to try to do this without moving the camera or falling off my chair. Okay, so far so good. Leigh Bardugo, The Familiar. This has had mixed reviews, and I think that it has to do with the fact that this is a standalone, and Leigh Bardugo is known for series, and the characters and the plot and the location for this, I think, is just so unrelated to that series that people who read the series first jumped into this thinking that somehow there would be a tie-in, and there's not, and felt confused by this. That's the best I can pick up from what I've read. If you see a good review, this is the first Leigh Bardugo they've read. If you see a bad review, they read the series and then read this. So you see what I'm saying? There's some disconnect there. I absolutely loved this book. And I was told that this was a vampire book. It is not a vampire book. So if you've been told that and are not interested in vampire books, maybe you will be interested in this one. There is a character who has, let's say, like a immortality. So I get that idea of confusing him maybe with sort of that vampire concept, but there's something else happening within there. And what I loved about this book is the prose. It is just beautifully written. This book reminded me a lot of Isabel Allende. If you're not familiar with Isabel Allende, you're familiar with the movie The House of Spirits with Meryl Streep. And that's based on one of her novels. Her writing is also prose. She has a lot of folklore that shows up in her writing. I wouldn't say it's magic in the classic sort of how we today think of magic and fantasy, right? It's not that, but there is, I would say, this kind of folklore. Yeah. And there's some magic of a type. Anyway, I'll let you read it and figure that out for yourself. But Isabel Allende also brings some of that into her stories at times. I mean, House of Spirits, that shows up in a couple of different places. If you only saw the movie House of Spirits, by the way, I highly recommend going and grabbing that book from the library. It is so in depth. And the House of Spirits movie did what they do for movies sometimes, where they took two characters and turned them into one. And they took an entire almost generation and folded it into this movie so they could get this timeline where they needed it. If you read the book, man, you get this whole other world, this whole other part that is just not even represented in the movie. And the movie was excellent, I thought, but the book is fantastic. But Lee Bardugo, The Familiar, in part it reminds me of Isabel Allende because this takes place in Spain and there is a lot of Latin culture that's expressed within this as well. So, and it's during the Spanish Inquisition. So that kind of historical fiction is in play here too. And that's really interesting. And Isabel Allende, while her novels are fiction, they are usually rooted in true historical experiences and events. So yeah, that kind of crossover happens within this too. I thought it was beautifully written and really engaging. Lee Bardugo, The Familiar. I highly recommend it. And if you have read her series, just know that this isn't that. This is just something else entirely from the author, and maybe give it a shot. So there's that one. Okay. Fun. Okay, let's do cozy fantasy because wow. I have needed some cozy in my world, and who doesn't right now, right? And so, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I actually read this last year, so this was a last year read, and then I got Map of the Otherlands this year when it came out in paperback, and so this was a this year read. And all I can tell you about this is delightful reading. Just really fun characters that are just cute and adorable and interesting and funny. You'll laugh a lot. There's a sweet love story that undercurrents the whole thing. And there's also fairies. Like, how can that not be fun? There's magic and there's fairies. It's just light, cozy fantasy. And I think it's really, really fun. The protagonist, the main character in this, is a college professor. So she's smart and witty, and you get all of that in this as well. She's really sassy. She has a really fun sense of humor. Yeah, I have only good to say. The third one is already out, but it's only in hardback. And obviously, I have the two paperbacks, so I'm being weird and holding out for the paperback so I can add it to my paperback collection of these. I do that sometimes. Sometimes what will happen is, like, I could see me donating these two and asking for the 3-book set in hardback as a set for a gift. You know what I mean? Do you do that? So say goodbye to the 2 paperback and bring the others in. These are 100% Andrea level rereads, totally rereadable. You can just crack them open and just go to town. You'll just fall right back into the story. It's precious. I highly recommend. Easy reading, cozy fantasy. Cozy fantasy. I cried, I think 5 times reading this book, literally because I was so touched. When was the last time tears ran down your face because something was just so touching that you just had to go get a Kleenex? It was just that precious. That's what I'll say about that. Absolutely precious. I'm reading the second one. There is a sequel. I'm reading it. I had to put a pin in it to get my book club book started, but I'll get back to it shortly. I cried 5 times reading this book because I was so touched. It is precious. I highly recommend. There's magic involved, but It's not like big magic doings. There's magic involved. What this is a story about people and character and kindness and connection. It's precious. It's delightful. Spicy, hilarious, action-packed, so much fun. Grown-up book, not recommending to preteens. Grown-up book, Quicksilver. You're just gonna fall in love. This guy is so sexy, and you just can't help it. You just fall for this main character. Both of the main characters, really, and it's in the point of view from a female character, and she is just super cool too. She's just hilarious for one thing. A lot of humor in here. I flew through this book. I read this book so fast, it was just ridiculous. I mean, in a couple of days, I could not put it down. If you're in a rut and you're like, what am I going to read that is just going to keep me going? Grab Quicksilver. You cannot put it down. You might get in trouble at work. Like, be careful, because you're never going to be able to put it down. I absolutely loved it. And there is a sequel coming, I believe, November of this year. So I'm debating what I might do if they do a special release when that comes out of a 2-books box set. I will probably buy the box set and give this one to a friend. There's nobody I wouldn't hand this over to. Everyone I know would love this book if they read it. And Legends and Lattes. Okay, I read Legends and Lattes last year. Let me show you the cover art from the paperback that I read, because you might recognize that one if you don't recognize this one. Let's find it. Legends and Lattes. There's the cover art from the paperback. Is that adorable? I love that. But I gave my paperback away because I had found the hardcover in a 2-book set, and I knew I wanted the second one. So I gave that away and bought this 2-box set. So for book 1, Legends and Lattes, I read last year. Book 2, Bookshops and Bone Dust, I read this year. It was the 4th book that I read. Here is the cover art for that if you do the paperback. And a 3rd one is on its way. Legends and Lattes was the first comfy, like, cozy fantasy I'd ever read. I didn't really know what that genre was specifically, so I read this, and then after that I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and then I was starting to grasp what cozy fantasy was. This story was so much fun, and I had just finished Throne of Glass series. You know what I mean? Like, I was in a series for a long time, and Throne of Glass, holy cow, are you committed? That is intense. And then just switch from that to this beautiful little story about, I don't know, I guess she's an orc that opens a coffee shop, and it is so precious and so delightful. I cried at the end of this one. I cried at the end of this one. It is so touching and so precious. What I'll say is, this is book 1. This is book 2. This is a prequel. I highly recommend you read them in order of publication, not date in the timeline. Does that make sense? Read this one first, then read this one. Travis Baldree, the author, am I saying that right? Baldree. Travis Baldree, the author. His prequel needs to be read second, in my humble opinion, exactly how he put them out. So I wouldn't change that. I know a lot of readers, when they figure out there's a prequel, will go back in timeline and read them in that order. And I understand that tendency, but I really think you will love this if you do it as the author presented them to us. And I'm looking forward to reading the 3rd one. I don't know much about it, except to say that a character who has a prominent role in the 2nd one, which is the prequel, seems to have a very prominent role in this 3rd one. In fact, it may be mostly about her. So I cannot wait. Cozy fantasy is winning my heart. So yeah, that is my favorite stuff books so far this year. My favorite stuff reading tools so far this year are pretty straightforward. 1, flags, page flags, page flags, page flags. I love flag and pages because it doesn't mark them up, although I have marked up plenty of books. But if I want to just write down some quotes that I flagged on this page, I can write them down into my book journal and then pull these flags. And then that way too, if I'm going to give this book away, donate it, whatever, my markings aren't all over it. So I've been ordering like 3 packs of those flags. You can get them at Staples and stuff too. And then a friend of mine for my birthday sent me a pretty little package, and in there she sent some beautiful floral flags. I've been using those on things too. I've really been using those in cookbooks more than anything. But when you look at my stack of books, you're going to see a common theme. I'm going to pull a few so you can see them. I haven't read that. That's why it doesn't have flags on it. She'll see what I'm talking about. Flags, flags, flags. I just love marking down great quotes. I put them in my little, if I don't know what to journal about in the morning, pull out my book from last night and see what I flagged. There's something delightful in there. Why else would I have flagged it? And so I love that. And then I'll also have these kind of like, oh yeah, moments, when I go back to the book and see what I flagged. Let's see what I flagged here. Let's see. Mr. Parnassus nodded. It's the little things, little treasures we find without knowing their origin, and they come when we least expect them. It's beautiful when you think about it. He loves it dearly. It was very kind of you. This is about a button that becomes a gift. So yeah, it just takes you back to, that character, that time, that space. But I allow him to dream of such things because he's a child, and who knows what the future will bring. Change often starts with the smallest of whispers, like-minded people building it up to a roar. Isn't that beautiful? Change often starts with the smallest of whispers, like-minded people building it up to a roar. So yeah, beautifully written, great quotes. So I just love going back and looking at those. So there's that. I will add a photo of my little lap desk that I got this year when Amazon Prime was doing its sale. It's simply a bean bag with a flat top on it, and I love it. It's working great for me. I just was having a hard time. I was constantly trying to balance. That desk is looking junky back there, isn't it? I was trying to balance books on pillows and things like that, and it was driving me crazy. I do have an e-reader, by the way. It's here, and we turned off my Kindle app because I just wasn't adding anything to it or reading it, but I have so much stuff already stored on it. And like I said in the previous video, what I like to do with my e-reader is stuff that I really don't need to hang on to. So trash, like trashy novels, rom-com, things like that. That I just don't really need to hang on to quotes from necessarily. That's kind of stuff. And also because I'm going to kind of skim read it, as we talked about in this video, the previous video. See, that's the problem. They're blending. Reads for the future, what's coming. I have a TBR pile next to my bed. Most of that is continuations of fantasy. They may be sequels to stuff that I read last year. But as we move towards the fall, I am going to get out some classic faves. So starting in probably end of September, it's a reread. I told you guys, I love to reread books. I think it's really fun. And when I reread a book, I go through it twice as fast. Like I'll be through it in no time. So I'm going to start with Pumpkin Spice Cafe. P.S. Not clean. Super spicy. This has a cute little cover on it. Do not buy those for a preteen. The next one after that, that's also super fall and just cute and adorable and super spicy. Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. I loved these stories. I read these last year, but I started late in the game. I think I read them all in December. So I want to actually read these kind of in their seasonal time. Does that make sense? And then Christmas Tree Farm will pick up in the beginning of December. But I have 2 Christmas reads that I want to do this year. Ooh, I'm moving this phone. Sorry. So Sandy by the Lakeside is doing Vlogust, where she does a vlog every day for the first 2 weeks of August. And she mentioned in that a Laura Ingalls Wilder book that made me jump off my chair. It's The Long Winter. And I still to this day think back about scenes from that book when I read it as a kid. So it's the Little House on the Prairie series, The Long Winter. And I checked that book out of the library so many times that eventually somebody ended up buying it for me. I don't know if it was my mom or who, but somebody actually ends up buying me a copy of that. So I am going to do a little fun splurge and find a copy of The Long Winter, Laura Ingalls Wilder. And I want to start that sometime mid-December to take me through to Christmas. I'm going to ask for on my gift list for Christmas this year, I'm going to ask for a collector's copy of Little Women. There's one at our local bookstore that is cloth cover and it has scissors embossed all over it in hot pink. It's so cute, but that's what I mean by a collector's edition. I'm not saying I want like a first edition signed copy that stays in glass. I mean, I just want a sort of upgraded edition of Little Women. And my hope is to start that the afternoon of Christmas. I think that would be a really fun Christmas read for a few days right around Christmas. So Little Women. And then I have the complete collection of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe series. And I just want to read the actual Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe right around that same holiday time. So after Little Women, I'll go into that. And that to me is a Christmas story because as a kid, I loved those stories, but I got a version one year when I was 8 or 9 that had the cassette tape and the book that went with it. And the book was mostly just pictures from Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. And the cassette tape was the full novel read on cassette. It was probably 2 tapes or something. And I remember that Christmas just sitting, we had that little tape recorder, you know, the one that had 5 buttons down here and one of them popped up and you slid the tape in. That's what I was listening to this story on and eating Christmas candy in my new nightgown that I got for Christmas. And it was just so delightful. And of course, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when the Ice Queen shows up, everything is snowy. It felt Christmassy to me as a kid. Of course, she lures Peter with that tainted candy. So the candy, the snow, the Ice Queen, it felt Christmassy to me as a kid. And of course, I was listening to it at Christmas. So I'm going to kind of rekindle that Christmas experience this year on Christmas break as well. So those are going to be some future reads. Like I'm already kind of lining up sort of fall through Christmas itself. In the meantime, my book club is reading James. I just started it last night and I'm already absolutely in love. It's Percival Everett and it is Jim from Huck Finn, his side of things, as best I can tell right now. And I'm absolutely adoring it. And yeah, I still have a few fantasy books lined up to finish up. I'm finishing the second one of these. And we'll see. I have a few one-offs that I think have sequels coming, but they're not done yet. And that may pull me through till I get ready for good old spicy pumpkin spice cafe. I am so ready for fall that it is a little, I don't know. I don't even know if it's healthy. It is so hot here that I actually, you guys, landed a little bit of a pre-heat stroke. I have actually had heat stroke here 3 times in the last 25 years. And boy, when it hits, you know it. You are down for about 48 hours. And I was doing things that should have given it to me. It was dumb. Like, I was working on redoing the crazy paving pavers in my backyard in August at noon, one of the times. So, right, like not smart. But this week, I got overwhelmed by heat simply just by running errands and being out and about in it. It is so oppressive. And so I think that's part of that. Where is fall? It's just a rebellion against this, frankly, painful weather that we're having. But because I sold my business, not sold my business, closed my business, we'll talk more about that later, but closed my business, I am going to be, normally I'm gearing up to be busier than I've ever been from like September 10th to December 20th. That is just the peak season in the food business. And that's not going to happen this year. So I think I'm also having this kind of like jump into fall because for the first time ever, I'm going to be able to really decorate my house and really burn pumpkin candles and really make pumpkin muffins and things for me, not for clients, that are devoted to me getting into that fall spirit. So I am so ready for that. I'm just really excited about it. I have one more book I want to show you. Hold on, let me grab it. Okay, I'm glad I set this over there. I would have forgotten it. So this is the book that I mentioned. I said in the last video, I told you what I was going to talk about in this video. So if you're just finding this video, that's confusing. But I mentioned that there'd be cozy fantasy, there'd be some spicy talk, there'd be some action-packed fantasy, a novel or two, and what I wouldn't necessarily say is self-help, but maybe growth, right? Personal growth. Isn't that a line from When Harry Met Sally? There's somebody staring at you from personal growth. So Sensitive is a New Strong. A family friend recommended this book to me, and I've been listening to it on Audible. A lot of times things that are like self-help, emotional growth, that kind of thing, I like to listen to on Audible. And in this particular case, the author is the narrator on Audible as well, which is lovely because she has a beautiful accent and she's really nice to listen to. She's a public speaker, so that makes sense. Like she's good at this. Um, the Power of Empath in an Increasingly Harsh World. This is a book that is, I think, meant to help you sort of determine if you are an empath. Is that a personality type or trait that you yourself carry? And there's a quiz in here that you can fill out to get yourself to answer that question, as well as just some history of her own journey, how she found that she was an empath, how she defines that. And then if you decide that that is something that relates to you, how knowing that can help you sort of function in this world that can be pretty hard on empath personality types. So the quiz, I think it's 34 questions. And I think if you answer like 5 positively, you have some level of empath in you. I answered 32 with a screaming at the top of my lungs, yes. A lot of the questions, she didn't even get the full question out. And I was like, yes, 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 since I was 3. Absolutely. For as far as I can remember back, I have felt that way in that situation. So Sensitive is the New Strong. It's such a really interesting concept about allowing yourself to be that empath, what that really can mean, and how it isn't a weak trait, it's a power trait if you kind of know what to do with it and how to use it. But it also is very shares a lot of information about how we need to be careful about certain things. Like my YouTube premium that I mentioned, I don't allow commercials into my life in any way, shape, or form. Commercials are almost an attack on me. They literally jangle my nervous system. The volume goes up in a commercial, the lighting, the flashing, music that I didn't ask for is suddenly in my home. I have a really hard time processing information in that way. It just comes at me like an attack. So I do everything in my power through my viewing with my viewing dollars, my budget for that, to keep that stuff out of my life. So on YouTube, I do YouTube Premium. I haven't seen a commercial on YouTube in years. But this book kind of explains why that is the case and sort of how to navigate knowing that and reminding yourself to take some steps to protect yourself if this is something that you experience. And so I have found it just really, really empowering. I had this like, I feel seen moment. And yeah, which is all we need sometimes, isn't it? But to just know that this was a real thing that was out there that a lot of people can relate to, I just felt connected to that. And it just let me kind of take a breath and just say, hey, okay, you can be this. It's okay. And if you know it, it helps you understand why you're particular about certain things and that it's okay to be particular about those things. So, yeah, that's the only kind of self-help sort of book that I've got going, but I've really loved it. And I've liked it on Audible so much that I bought the paperback version on Thrift Books because I want to go in with a highlighter. I want to write in my answers to the quiz in ink, and then I want to highlight a bunch of things that I've heard her say in the Audible version that I feel like are things I need to revisit on occasion and remind myself about. By the way, Thrift Books, I've really been loving. I just went ahead and signed up with them so I get email reminders and etc. And I have made a new practice of if I want a book, I start there. I start at Thrift Books. And do you know there are 2 new fantasy books out? The Spell Shop and the Enchanted Forest. They both came out this year, I think. They're in like hardcover with like the pretty sprayed pages at Barnes and Noble right now. Do you know that I found both of them on Thrift Books in the special edition for at least $10 less per book than they were listed at Barnes and Noble? So it doesn't always have to be used books from the 80s, although I have found some really cool used books from the 80s too. in that space. But yeah, and so I checked thrift books, and sure enough, there was a used copy for $7. It took 2 weeks to get here. I think that's one of the things, about thrift books versus going to Barnes and Noble or going to Amazon or going to your local bookstore. We have a new local bookstore that opened up that's focusing on sci-fi, fantasy, and romance. And I think that is super cool. And I really want to spend as much of my fantasy and book shopping dollar with her that I can. And I was talking about the special edition of Little Women. I'm gonna ask my husband to shop with her for that, and she will probably order it for him. So I'm trying to give those dollars to this little small store where I can, but something like this she'll never carry anyway. And this is an older book. Okay. I think that's all I have about books right now. I am curious to know if you're doing a reading journal. Did you start one? It felt like homework. If so, I'll link to my reading journal flop and success video in this video. I tried to put one together that turned into a monster. I mean, a monster. It was Frankenstein. And I just shut it down and started this quick little notebook, not a lot of room to write. And it's worked out so great for me. So if you have one that feels like a monster, put it away and start a small one. Just a little something where you can just jot down what you're currently reading and what you think about it. And as I shared in my previous video, I just put what number book it was that I've read so far this year, a star rating, who the characters are, where it took place, and a couple favorite quotes. What I will do next time for the same book journal, I already have this exact same Archer and Olive journal. Next time I'll go this way because if I go landscape, I can get a lot more in it. I can write longer quotes, etc. And yeah, so I'd be curious to know if you're keeping a reading journal, and even if you're just jotting down in your daily planner or whatever, if you finish a book and your thoughts on it or something like that. But yeah, I think it's really fun, and it's fun to look back at them and kind of remember. Again, if you're going with an e-reader, it's so easy to forget that information. Our brains are trained not to store a lot of screen information. And so having a little notepad nearby that just helps you remember what you loved about it, if you want to read the sequels, that kind of stuff, I think is handy, because once we get pen and ink in hand, it starts to engage us and anchor it in a little bit better. So I knew these would be 2 pretty long videos. That's why I broke them up. I am so happy to have you guys here. Thank you for being in this space with us. Next time up, I'm going to do favorite things, podcasts, and vlogs. That will include journaling podcasters and vloggers, but it's going to include some knitting podcasts and vloggers, and just, lifestyle ones that I've really loved. And I'll tell you a little bit about why I love them, how I found them, and the impact that they've had on me. And that's it for today. So finally back, 2 back-to-back videos since I haven't done anything for a month. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you soon. You can always reach me on Instagram at Journals for Breakfast. Please feel free to follow me there. And it's an easy place to send me a message. I do check comments here on YouTube, but it can be a day or 2. It can be, a little time. Whereas Instagram, I'm usually on at some point during any given day, and love going through and checking messages there. So again, I'm Journals for Breakfast on Instagram also. Thanks for being here. Let me know what you're reading. And I hope you're staying cool. Drink something cool. Keep yourself cool. And fall is coming. See y'all soon.